The coalition has proposed a forced breakup of Qantas and Jetstar. The Shadow Transport Minister, Bridget McKenzie, is pushing for the federal government to be handed divestiture powers in the aviation industry. She says the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, needs to address the issue.
We need to get prices down for the Australian travelling public and productivity up in the aviation sector. And the white paper from Catherine King is silent on those issues. That means Treasurer Jim Chalmers has to do the heavy lifting.
Joining me now is Nationals Leader David Littleproud. David Littleproud, thanks so much for your time. What exactly does the coalition want here? Just the power to be able to threaten a divestiture, or do you actually want to do it?
No, I think everyone's taken a step ahead of exactly what Bridget McKenzie said. There's a competition review. Even the Treasurer in his own department says that there's challenges with competition, there's competition concentration, and that this review should look at whether there is evidence for greater powers of the ACCC and what they might look like. That is a far cry from what's been touted on the front pages of papers. This is a sensible look at competition to ensure that we have cheaper airfares, more competitive airfares, and your actual bag turns up to the location that you're going to. And I think this is a calm, methodical way of working through competition policy for airlines, as we did in identifying the evidence that was stark in terms of supermarkets. But we haven't taken that step yet. I think it's important to garner evidence, to understand the extent, and then obviously work with the ACCC around the tools that they need to make sure that competition is there. And how do we encourage, as governments, to incentivise more competition within the aviation sector?
Sounds like you're walking it back a bit. Did this go through Shadow Cabinet?
No, and I think if you read the op-ed, the statements made by Bridget McKenzie says very clearly that she wants to look at the competition. We should garner the evidence. That's what you do. That's how you formulate good policy. Now, what the tools are that the ACCC are needed to ensure that until you get greater competition in the aviation sector, what are those tools that they would require to make sure that there is fair prices and good service is one of the things that this review should do. And unfortunately, the Infrastructure Minister has done nothing on it. Is now an opportunity for the Treasurer through this competition review, when they actually themselves have highlighted there's a lack of competition within the aviation sector. How do we get that competition in there? And how do we have the regulatory guide rails to protect us until that competition gets there?
In what circumstances would you actually flex this power, though, and sell off Qantas and Jetstar? I mean, it's been proposed. You're saying there's a lot of options on the table, but I mean, there's a nuclear one in there.
Well, and that's where, is it necessary? I mean, when you look at supermarkets, the current ACCC chair herself has said that she would like divestiture in the toolkit to be able to deal with supermarkets.
But is that just a threat?
When you undertake...
I mean, do you want that in the toolkit?
It's a deterrent. It's not a threat,
Right.
It's a deterrent. It's what you want with the supermarkets is that there's a deterrent, that they do the right thing and they treat people fairly. And with the supermarkets case, you've got to understand, we already have divestiture powers in this country. In fact, Anthony Albanese supported it. He supported it for the breakup of our energy giants. He is prepared to stand up to the CEOs of the big energy companies, but on the supermarkets, when there was evidence, he's gone missing. When there's Australians tonight that won't have dinner, wouldn't we make sure there's transparency and fairness? But we took a process to make sure that we understood all the evidence, and this is the start of a process around the aviation sector that gives us an insight and input from the ACCC themselves about the tools they require. And I think the ACCC have been eminently sensible, but if we need to give them more tools to enforce regulatory guide rails to make sure that competition is respected where there's competition concentration, then that's good policy settings. And that's what Bridget's saying.
You're the alternative government, though. What you say has a ripple effect. Did this go through Shadow Cabinet?
No, because it was an op-ed about a review that the government has put out, and Bridget McKenzie has quite rightfully asked that all options be looked at for the ACCC to understand, that the evidence be garnered, and then from there you'll make your policy settings. And that's the whole idea of this review, is to actually, when there is an identification of market concentration, that you would undertake a review process, understand the evidence, and then act accordingly. That's good governance, and that's what Bridget McKenzie has articulated very clearly here, and quite rightfully.
So you agree with her, but it hasn't gone through shadow cabinet because you say it's an op-ed. So can I take that to mean that it's not quite coalition policy yet?
Well, it's not coalition policy yet because we haven't got the evidence. The evidence was clear in the supermarkets. We haven't had the reviews that have identified where the competition bottlenecks are with aviation. But this is the first step that we should be open-minded to work through that process in a transparent way and understand the options and be guided in many cases by what the ACCC believe are the tools they need. That's been done with supermarkets. That hasn't been done with aviation. And so we haven't formulated a policy because why would you formulate a final policy until you've got the evidence and you've heard from the experts? That's good governance, and that's what we're sticking to. But what we're saying is we shouldn't hold back. We should look at all the options and listen to the ACCC about what tools they need.
Okay, let me ask you about this Royal Commission report. We're talking about over 6,000 submissions onto veterans and Defence Force personnel suicide. This has been an ongoing tragedy, to be quite frank. We know what happens with Royal Commissions. Both sides of government have done it. You have this fanfare today. Everyone accepts the recommendations in principle. We all sit around and hear the commitment to fixing the problem, and then they fade to the never, never because it's all too hard. What is your commitment today on this scourge?
Yeah, well, I appreciate firstly, when we were in government, we were the ones that initiated this Royal Commission. And what we need to do is sit down calmly without having seen any of their recommendations and the extent of them. It's very difficult to make any commitment whatsoever at this juncture. But I think there is bipartisan support in this building to work through, and I understand there's over 100 recommendations, to work through those as quickly as we possibly can in making sure that this is rectified and that those Australians that are prepared to put a uniform on for us to lay their lives down at the altar of our democracy be supported when they leave Defence Force and during their time in the Defence Force. So I think we have to, as a nation, hold each other to account on this about the recommendations that come out. And I think you have greater success, chance of success, if there's bipartisan approach to it. And I think even when the opposition, before they got into government, were bipartisan in their approach in wanting to work through this. So I think that's the first step, is that we try to maintain that on as many of those recommendations, as hard as they are, that we put the shoulder to the wheel, but we work together and collaboratively as a parliament. I think that's what the Australian people expect, particularly for something as important as this issue.
We are standing by to take you live to that media conference. Before we do that, David, I just want to finally ask you on this same issue. Culture is a problem, and we're looking at time and time again, report after report, that shows it's so difficult to attract young Australians. They just don't want to join the Defence Force at the moment, and we have a real problem on that front. At the same time, you're looking at these shocking statistics on suicide. So it's little wonder there's a culture issue as well. Does there need to be consideration? We'll wait to see the recommendations. And perhaps this isn't part of it, that there would be, a complete change of leadership within the ADF.
Yeah, and look, I think it's important we look at every aspect of this, and it might not necessarily be that it's all about money. It is, as you go to the harder culture, about not just attracting, but how you actually treat those men and women that are in our Defence Forces during their tenure. I mean, when we've lost more off the battlefield than we have on, there is something inherently wrong there that we actually need to address, and that goes to the heart of what I think may be some of the tougher decisions we need to make, because governments can stand up and say we're going to throw money at problems, but it's actually more the cultural problems that are going to take more courage. And I think that's why it's important that you get a commitment from ourselves as opposition that if there are those hard recommendations, more so around culture, that need to be addressed, that we give the government the space to be able to deal with that, and we deal with everyone fairly and openly. But if there is recommendations for change, particularly around that aspect, then we should have the courage to lean in on it.
David Littleproud, always good to see you. Thank you.